Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. It is a super gloomy, really dark, rainy, dreary night tonight. So I thought what better to do than to share a creepy paranormal story time with all of you. I figured tonight's story would be a little bit darker and a little bit creepier than some of the ones that I've told before. It's one of those that I've kind of been holding off on because, like I said, I really don't like bringing this stuff up. I really don't like talking about it, especially in my home. But for you guys, since there has been such a big interest lately in my paranormal stories, I thought that's exactly what I would do because it is such a dark, dreary, rainy night. But to get me prepared, I'm not going to be doing it on camera, so this will not be a mukbang. But I went out and I got Chinese food because it's cozy, it's comfort food, and it's going to help me get through this. I got way more than I think I'm going to be able to eat, but it'll at least be leftovers for tomorrow because I'm going to have a long day tomorrow too that I'm going to have something to eat. First off, I have some wonton soup, some little fried wontons to put into it, an egg roll, a bag of crab rangoons, which is the best part of any Chinese takeout meal, sesame chicken and white rice, and because every time I go to my local Chinese restaurant, I always get a shrimp tempura roll because it's so good. Like you can see, I definitely have way more food than I'm gonna be able to eat tonight, but it'll be good for leftovers tomorrow. The only plus side is it's comfort food. It's gonna get me through this story. So bear with me, hang tight. Everybody, go get a snack, go get a drink, order some food, sit down, relax, get a blanket, turn on a light, because this story is going to be really creepy. So my story tonight is not about this house, obviously. Like I said, I really don't want to talk about this house while I'm in this house, at least not anytime soon. Eventually down the road, I probably will be telling you guys some stories about some of the things that did happen here. But what I'm going to talk about is the house that I actually grew up in. I lived in two houses as a child. The first house, I honestly experienced the most paranormal activity out of both of them, but the house that I spent most of my childhood in, that my mother and father and my younger brother still live in to this day, did have some creepy things occur in it. Now, the big thing to note here is that house actually was my father's house that he grew up in. My grandfather built the house, and they were the only family that ever lived in it. So that's the nice thing about it, is that the house itself was not owned by any other family. It has been in my family. However, some things that people tend to forget about in the paranormal world is it's not necessarily just houses and homes that are haunted. The land that the house was built on has quite a history. Aside from things that people talk about where it could be land that once belonged to Native American tribes because they were very prevalent in our area here in New York, another big thing to note is the land that this house was built on actually used to be all land that belonged to one estate. Most of the street and the neighborhood that I grew up in all was property of a huge estate that used to be on the river. Many years back, it was when my father was a child, the estate actually burned down. I don't know the entire details of it. The ruins of it still kind of are out in the woods near my parents' house. It was just like right around the corner from there. But a lot of it is just the foundation. The scary thing is it's pretty much on an open field now. You can kind of see a few things that were left behind where the house was, but a lot of it is what's underneath the ground, like the basement of the house. And everybody has always been warned forever, especially the kids in the neighborhood when we used to go out and play, to not go out in that field and not play where the house had burned down because the ground was weak there. There have been instances where we've actually seen deer that have fallen through the ground out there. Now, I don't know a lot about the history of the land, aside from the fact, like I said, it all used to belong to one estate back in like the 1800s. There is a very small cemetery just beyond the neighbors who I grew up next to's property. A lot of the tombstones there we actually went and saw when we were younger. You can't make out any of the names on them. They are really old, they're really tiny and withered away. But it is a collection there, and it's said to be the family that had lived in the estate. Now, I'm not going to go into all this detail about everything that happened in the house that I grew up in. What I'm going to talk about today is what I experienced in the house firsthand, and some of the things that people in our neighborhood had also seen. Growing up, I remember our neighbors across the street, who we were really close with, used to say that they had a ghost in their house. This family across the street consisted of 3 boys, Two were twins, and they were my younger brother's age, and their oldest son was my age. So we were all very close. We hung out all the time. We went to school together. We were always hanging out, and we were pretty much like best friends. Now, the one twin who was my brother's friend, he used to claim that there was a ghost in the house. He would tell us all the time that there were magnets on the fridge that would get moved around. Things would be spelled out with like the alphabet magnets on the fridge. The clock would stop at certain times of the day. It was just very, very strange. Another family really didn't believe in the spiritual world and, you know, ghosts and things like that. And at first they took it that their boys were just making up stories. But there was one day that their mother actually caught the magnets on the fridge moving. She said this was around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it terrified her. She called my mother right away. She told my mother what she saw, and every time we had gone over to the house after that, she used to point to the fridge and show my mother and be like, look, we can wait and see it happen. But obviously, we never caught it. She did see it happen a few more times after that, though. And the odd thing is, she said it was always just about 4 p.m. after the boys had come home from school that she would see this happen. We went on believing that their house was simply just haunted by this one ghost that liked to move magnets on the fridge. Nothing ever came out of it that was harmful. Nobody was ever hurt, anything like that. It was really creepy, of course, thinking about it. If you see magnets move on your fridge, of course you're going to be creeped out. But there was never like a feeling of dread that came around it. It was more or less just you saw it happen, and in that moment, it scared you because you realize what happened because magnets do not move on their own. Now, a couple months later, we became really close friends with two girls who moved in the house next door to them. The oldest daughter was my brother's age, and the youngest daughter was about a year younger than her. We all hung out all the time, and a lot of times all of us, the three boys across the street, my brother and I, and the two girls used to hang out in their house and play hide and go seek because their house was really big and the basement of their house was super creepy. We loved playing in it because it was her dad's workshop. He built a lot of doll houses. He built a lot of like furniture, things like that. We used to hide out down there and play around when he wasn't home and he was out doing other jobs. Now, it was during this time that the oldest daughter, who I had become really close with, confided in me that her mother was terrified of the house and didn't want to live there anymore. I had asked her why, because I always thought that it was a beautiful house. She told me that her mother, one afternoon while waiting to pick the girls up from the bus stop, had seen a woman upstairs in the bedroom. She said she looked like an older spirit of like a time far bygone, and it really scared her when she saw her. At first, I had told my friend that it may have been the spirit of the old woman who used to live in their house before them. She had done a lot of things for the elementary school and the children in the area, and she had passed away at an elderly age. So at first I had told my friend that maybe that's who it was, that her spirit was still in the house and it was nothing to be afraid of. But her mother said it wasn't an older spirit, it was a young woman, but she seemed to be in like Victorian garb. Ever since the night that my friend's mother had seen this spirit at around 3:30 in the afternoon, they kept every single light on in that house from the top floor to the basement on at night. They wouldn't turn any light off. To this day, when I go over to my parents' house at night, all their lights are on. And my mother says that they still keep every light in that house on all night long. Again, from the top floor all the way to the basement. It doesn't matter if they're in that room or not. Every light in that house is on. Obviously, my friend never spoke about the woman again, but her mother was convinced that the house was severely haunted. And she didn't like talking about spirit. He pretty much forbid any talk about anything like that. But she was terrified of this woman that she had seen at around 3:30 in the afternoon. We never thought anything of it when we were growing up, and over time we tended to forget about it because nobody really talked about it anymore. But years later, I was in the basement of my house at around 4:30 in the afternoon. The basement in my parents' house is completely finished. It's like a second living room and it's massive. So I spent most of my time down there hanging out with like the entertainment systems. We had like a pool table, air hockey, like arcade games, all that stuff in the basement. So that's kind of where I made myself at home. So I've been down there instant messaging one of my friends on my laptop, and I turned around really quick, and at the foot of the stairs, I thought that I saw a woman standing there in a white Victorian dress that almost looked like a bridal gown. It lasted for a split second. It was really quick. I blinked and she was gone. I laughed. I was like, I'm seeing things. And I messaged my friend and I was like, wow, I'm really out of it tonight. I turned around. I thought I just saw a woman in the basement. I'm losing my mind. I've been working too late on the computer because I was doing a lot of writing. I was sending a lot of pieces out to publishers, so I had been staring at my computer most of the day. So I told my friend this, and I was like, maybe it's time I put my computer away because obviously I'm seeing things. So I packed everything up and I went upstairs. My mother was in the kitchen. I went over and was talking to her, and I was kind of just joking around, and I told her, you're never gonna guess what I thought I saw in the basement. Almost immediately, as if on cue, my little brother comes into the room. Now, I didn't say a word about what I saw. That could be anything from a spider, a mouse. They had gotten snakes in the basement before. Thankfully, not when I lived there, but like, it's creepy stuff like that, right? He comes in and he says to me, are you talking about the lady in the white dress? So, of course, I had chills at this point because I didn't even mention her. I said nothing about it. So I looked at him and I was like, have you seen her too? And he says, yeah, I see her when I come home from school. So right then and there, I knew when he came home from school, it was about 4 o'clock. So that would push it to about 4:30. Usually if I wasn't in the basement, my brother was down there playing video games. So right away, I knew he had seen her at about 4:30. I asked him to describe her to me. He described exactly what I saw. He told me that she looked like a lady out of the Victorian era, and it looked like she was wearing a wedding dress. But he told me, and now that I had thought back to it, he said it looked like her dress was wet. And once he said that, I thought the same thing. Her dress looked wet, as if she had been in the river. Now, something else to note that I really didn't notice at first until I really got thinking about it. But do you know that feeling you get like when you go underwater in your ears, where it's like the water pressure? Right before I turned around and I saw this woman at the foot of the stairs, I got like a ringing in my ear and it almost felt like I was being pushed underwater. So right when he told me that it looked like her dress was wet, like she had been in the water, that came back to me and I was like, well, when I turned around to see her right before then, I felt like water pressure was in my ears, which I found to be odd. Now, had she died and drowned in the river, perhaps that could be a reason why. It could be signaling her appearance. It also could be because she came from by the river. If she was a spirit from the estate that was built on the river, and again, it could be signaling her appearance. However, another thing to note that many people have said is that spirits do travel through water. Water can be seen as a passageway or a gateway to the spirit world, and sometimes spirits can travel through water. And perhaps that almost water pressure sensation could have been signaling that transportation between realms. Now, we never talked about her again because I really didn't want to bring it up. My mother was always terrified of the basement of the house. She said, I've never seen anything down there, but I always get a bad feeling. And she says, maybe that's why. Maybe the spirit of this woman lives there. My mother and my dad actually lived in the basement of that house right after they got married, before they moved into their first house. And my mother never liked it. She always hated the basement. She always told my father that she felt like something was down there. She was never at ease. So right away, that's the first thing she thought of. She said she had never seen the woman, but if my brother and I had seen the same woman without actually speaking to each other about it, she thought that maybe that spirit lived in the basement of the house, and that's the feeling that she was getting. Now, the thing I started to piece together is the fact that I saw her about 4:30 in the afternoon. Right away, my memory clicked, and I remembered the story that my neighbors had told about the woman in the white dress that their mother had seen at around 3:30 in the afternoon. And then about my other neighbors who saw the magnets moving at about 4 in the afternoon. Now, like I said, all of the land used to belong to the estate. So my first thought that I ended up talking to my mother about was that perhaps this was the spirit of someone who lived at the estate, and all she was doing was passing by and maybe taking a walk through the property, and every half an hour she would pass from one house to the next. It only made sense because it seemed like she only came at very specific times. It was always 4 p.m. when our neighbors across the street would see the magnets move. And my brother and I both confirmed that it was around 4:30 that we both had seen her. I never saw her again. I only ever saw her the one time. The next time that I could have seen her was around 4:30, and I started to get that heavy pressure in my ear. I immediately went upstairs. I wasn't going to hang around. I wasn't going to wait and see if she appeared again. I just didn't want anything to do with it. But I knew that it was around that time and I was getting that pressure in my ear again. So I'm sure she probably would have appeared if I waited around. However, my brother said he did see her again. This time, though, he claimed, and this is where it gets a little creepy. I didn't see this because, again, I only saw her for a split second. But this time, my brother said that he saw her again and got a better look, and her lower jaw was missing. So obviously now it's a much scarier image than we remember, because at first, like I said, I thought she was just a Victorian woman in a dress, perhaps a bride that had drowned, and that's all I saw. But my brother claims that her lower jaw was missing, and that is very, very creepy and much different than what I had initially seen. My brother claimed to see many different things down in the basement. At one time, he told me that he thought he saw a witch and someone with a very long nose that was like almost like a hag that was down there. But then he told me that, I don't know if it was the hag or if it was this woman, something touched him. He said he felt someone come up behind him and felt a hand on his shoulder, and he knew right away that it was a spirit that was touching him. So that was really creepy because I'd never been physically touched by a spirit, but my brother said that it touched him and it terrified him. And again, that he would get the pressure like water in his ears. We always seemed to avoid the basement at around 4:30. We would usually wait until after dinner to go back down there because my brother and I really didn't want to run into her again. And like we said, if she was just passing through, we didn't want to interfere with her. We didn't get the feeling that she was necessarily a bad spirit. I feel like the only fear that came out of it was the fact that we realized what we saw once she was gone, and then it was more or less like, holy crap, like something was there. But it wasn't a fear as in if we looked at her and instantly felt dread. Because usually with dark spirits, if you see them, you instantly feel sickness and dread and just, you know right away that it's bad. But with her, it wasn't a bad feeling. It was more or less after she was gone, we realized that something had been there, and that's when it sort of made us uneasy. However, this is around the time that I had gotten Scarlet. I adopted her, and she moved into the basement because at the time, my other cat, Tayoshi, and her did not get along. Tayoshi lived upstairs, and Scarlet lived in the finished basement because I spent most of my day down there, and then at night I spent it with my other cat. Once she moved down into the basement, I realized that we really didn't see the spirit anymore. I don't know if the presence of a cat had scared her off and she just never came back, or if she decided to change her route and she had maybe stopped visiting our house, or we just happened not to catch her at the time that she was there. But that definitely was one of the creepier moments living at my parents' house when I grew up, because I know what I saw, and the fact that I didn't even have to explain what I saw for my brother to tell me he saw the same thing at the same time, it just creeped me out. Now, there are many, many more stories about the house that I grew up in, about the neighborhood, and everything like that, but this was pretty much the story I wanted to start off with. It wasn't too scary. It was about obviously a paranormal spirit that I had seen while living there, and who seemed to make her rounds to the neighborhood. She was known by our neighbors across the street for moving the magnets on their fridge, and she was known by their neighbors, who were also our good friends, for being a spirit that appeared in the bedrooms in the late afternoon, right before the kids came home from school. Like I said, I never got the feeling that she was a bad spirit. I feel like she was a good one that just was making her rounds through the neighborhood and passing through her property, that maybe just got left behind and stuck here in our realm and never really truly passed on. I don't know what happened to her. I tried looking information up on the land, on the house, to see if any documents had been there about maybe a young woman that had died or had drowned, or a bride, anything like that, and unfortunately, no information on the house and the neighborhood had come up, so I was never really able to track anything down. At the end of the day, we all know what we saw. All of us had seen this at different times, but if any of us even started to mention anything about it, everyone knew exactly what we were talking about. And even though I have never seen her again since that day, and I know that every time I've gone to my parents, I've never run into her, I still believe that she may wander the neighborhood still. Maybe not necessarily in the homes that she used to, but I think her presence is still known very well in our neighborhood and along the river. So that was my story for today. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed telling it. Like I said, it was a little bit more creepy than some of the ones I told before. This was actually involving an actual spirit who made herself known in our home that I actually saw for myself. Eventually, I'm going to be telling a bit more stories, more about things that were seen in that house that I grew up in, as well as things that occurred here and in the first house that I lived in that was extremely, extremely haunted. But until then, if you like this video, as always, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this, talking about the paranormal and all the other things that I talk about in my videos. I hope you all have a wonderful night, a great rest of the week, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!